A lot of the best comedy was accidental now. It was art that lacked an artist. No one involved intended for this image to be funny. A pensive Abraham Lincoln holding watch over Donald Trump, himself holding watch over room temperature chicken McNuggets and quarter pounders he could not possibly be happier about. He later called them hamburgers. And other times when politicians made gaffes, they left him sort of half-finished, and it was the comedian's job to chisel him out the rest of the way, but there was no work left to be done here. He'd completed it. That meant it was pretty tough sledding for Saturday Night Live, the nation's comic laureates who now had to figure out how to tell jokes the universe had already told in full. They sure did try. The following weekend, in an interminable 8-minute long opening sketch, they swung at the piñata 50 times and they didn't hit it once. These are genuinely talented, funny people, but it didn't matter. All they could do, all anyone could do really, was parrot and rearrange the stuff the president already said. When Pete Davidson drops the punchline, you can kinda tell he knows this sucks.
Hamburgers!
Everything went so upside down, especially in the immediate aftermath of the election, that one of the only times SNL was funny was the one time they were trying really hard not to be funny, with the character of Hillary Clinton mournfully covering Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah. That was very strange and supremely embarrassing on its own, but at the end, pretend Hillary turned to the camera and assured her supporters everything was gonna be okay.
I'm not giving up, and neither should you.
Something that just a few nights prior, the real Hillary very famously did not do. It was yet another perfectly delivered joke that was certainly not intentional. As silly as all this was, I'm willing to chalk it up as a great shared cultural embarrassment. They reflected where a lot of us were at. They were just doing it on TV. We were all going through it. It was not a good time for any of us, and when we tried to find redemption somehow, it manifested in really funny ways. And believe me, I would love to be able to tell you I was totally above it all. I really would. I was among the legions of people who hopped on the Atlanta Falcons bandwagon on February 5th, 2017, just 2 weeks and change after Trump took office. Now, I don't want to overblow this too much. A whole bunch of people, regardless of political affiliation, saw this simply as what it was, a football game. But I know a large chunk of the audience bought into it the way I did. For the first time, a Super Bowl really, truly meant something to me. I wanted justice to prevail on the football field. I was hoping for a meaningless little symbolic victory that would make me feel slightly better for a little while. And wouldn't you know it, even football's greatest comedy troupe had stopped putting out funny material. Ever since the Falcons lost on that pick 2 on December 4th, they were all business in a way they had never ever been in their 51-year history. Their offense was habitually hanging around 40 points on their opponents without even thinking about it. Their defense wasn't given an inch until garbage time. It was as though they realized it might well be them who needed to play the hero, and they'd spent the last couple of months shaping up. To the casual observer, who was only now getting to know them, they really did look the part. But there was so much they didn't understand. So many things they could not know. Those of us who knew them well had to wonder which Falcons we were going to get. Were we really going to see the Death Star they'd become of late? Was it safe for us to put our hopes in them? Or were we about to get taken for another ride? It seemed useful to look back at their previous trip at the Super Bowl and figure out why they'd lost that one. On paper, it was because the Broncos had figured out how to completely neutralize the Falcons' offense as they approached the red zone, but the carnival of bullshit leading up to it surely had something to do with it. There were not one, but 3 major distractions they had to deal with. This time, remarkably, the shoe was on the other foot. The Falcons flew into Houston largely without incident. There was no ancient feud to relitigate, and nobody got arrested. It was the Patriots who created a circus to themselves. Over the years, both the Atlanta Falcons and New England Patriots had retained a sort of celebrity ambassador, someone who hung out on the sidelines and made buddies with the star players. In the 90s, during the Rowdy Glanville years, the Falcons enjoyed the company of MC Hammer. Later, but not too much later, the Patriots sideline VIP was Donald Trump, a close friend of Patriots owner Robert Kraft. As far back as the 2003 playoffs, he was there on game day as part of his apparent effort to set up Tom Brady with his daughter. Prior to that, he'd flown Brady around on his private jet after his first season as a starter, and in fact, back in 1988, he'd made a serious effort to buy the Patriots himself. Now, the Patriots were not the only team Trump thought about buying over the years, and it's true that prior to running for president, he was photographed buddying up with plenty of totally random famous people. The Patriots did not necessarily have to be the Donald Trump team. Owner Robert Kraft, coach Bill Belichick, and quarterback Tom Brady could have simply been guys who knew some famous guy before he ran for president. These three could have spoken out against him, although I don't think we were expecting that. Much more likely, they could have just quietly moved on from him. Anyone who makes the Trump-Patriots connection hears this question a lot. Why do you have to bring politics into this? Well, don't look at me, I didn't do it. They did. And all three of them went well out of their way to do it. Days before Super Bowl 51, Kraft spoke openly about his close friendship with Trump and professed his solidarity. Belichick, ever the tactical genius, wrote Trump a letter right before Election Day, one that Trump said he gave him permission to read in a rally to give him some last-minute ammo. It was not for political purposes, Belichick said of the letter, in which he made sure to throw in the campaign's tagline.
To make America great again.
Brady, for his part, bought his ticket back in September 2015, well after it became clear to anyone paying attention that this was a white supremacist running for president. It would be great, he said. Of the three, he was the only one who tried to weasel his way out, claiming that he hadn't heard about Trump targeting Muslims and his immigration ban. Bullshit. Everyone had heard. It was all over the news. He just didn't care. Most of the time when Brady talked, it sounded like he'd panicked and started reading off a $7 bag of potato chips. Our family only uses locally sourced fair trade, etc., etc. Occasionally something real did sneak in. I don't like confrontation, he said. Those things don't make me feel good. Off the field, Brady would shit his pants whenever someone asked him a hard question. On the field, Brady was a god. During the 16 years Brady and Belichick had led the Patriots, they'd seen and done it all. This was, without question, the greatest dynasty ever assembled in the NFL. They'd now made their 7th Super Bowl appearance in 16 years together, making it an almost every other season affair. They knew what it was like to come out of nowhere like they did in 2001, and they knew what it was like to fall short against all odds like they did when they lost Super Bowl 42 after completing the first 16-0 record in NFL history. At various points, they'd fielded both overpowering offenses and league-leading defenses. Thanks to Belichick's unparalleled genius, they had this almost supernatural ability to assume whatever form was necessary to win football games. People will still be talking about these Patriots teams 100 years from now. Just about anyone could have lined up against this team and played the hero by default. Why the Falcons? How was it that a team that hadn't made the playoffs in several years and started this one 7-5 woke up one day and started bulldozing every team in its path to make it to the first ever politically charged Super Bowl? God knows why it had to be them, but it was them.
At first, it felt a little weird for the Falcons to be branded somewhat as America's team. Now, this wasn't America's team in the sense that delusional Cowboys fans popped out and all of a sudden became Falcons fans, because at least the Cowboys do have a history of winning. The Falcons are a team that's mostly been a laughing stock across the league that at times I'm not even proud to cheer for. After suffering through mismanagement of players, blown leads, and just the most creative ways of losing games, it felt strange for people to be ready to embrace and pull for us. If there was ever a time to hop on this sad bandwagon though, this was the moment. Atlanta was in the perfect position to represent the side of America that didn't vote Donald Trump into office. Sure, Georgia was one of the many states that helped Trump in his overall victory, but if you look into the diverse areas of Metro Atlanta, the people of the city voted against evil. And this is what this game kind of shaped up to be. The Falcons were the good guys who could rarely ever catch a break in a position to win their first ever Super Bowl. The Patriots were this evil squad who had been here multiple times and won, supported by this huge doofus who found his way into office. At the end of the day though, yes, this was just a football game. So of course I wanted to see my team come out victorious, but I would be lying if I didn't say that a win would feel so much sweeter coming against a football dynasty and their orange-faced supporter. With any election, the most you could do is vote for your favorite candidate and really hope for the best. That's not how football works. I don't have a vote on their play calling. The most I can do is maybe vote for a Falcons player to win the Player of the Week award. What I'm getting at is, I don't have any control over how the Falcons will perform. In the weeks leading up to the big game, I wanted to be confident in Atlanta. I can't even remember how many times I randomly muttered to myself, "We got this." I was talking the talk and walking the walk, but it was hard to forget just who the Falcons were in the back of my head. How could I feel fully confident in a team that's fumbled opportunities before? Yeah, this season has been great, but this is the Super Bowl we're talking about. A game that this team has zero experience with, versus a team with a full-ass LinkedIn resume of Super Bowl appearances. All I could do was have faith in my team, but best believe I was proudly repping.
Here's what you need to know about Donald Trump and the Atlanta Falcons. If I'm wearing an Atlanta Braves hat in public, a stranger might ask me what part of the South I'm from, as in the entire South. If I'm wearing an Atlanta Falcons hat, they don't even bother asking me if I'm from Georgia. They just ask what part of Atlanta I'm from. And more often than not, the person asking the question is black. I am very, very white, and this conversation often happens in some of the most segregated parts of our nation. At their core, the Atlanta Falcons are carried along by black fans in a black city. So a Super Bowl between Trump's best friends and this particular franchise, at this particular moment in time, it can't help but say the quiet part loud. The departed John Lewis was Atlanta's congressman in District 5, a place Trump famously said was, quote, in horrible shape. Among other things, District 5 is home to Coca-Cola's world headquarters, America's busiest airport, a litany of skyscrapers and foreign banks, and the place where the Braves once had a stadium before departing for Cobb County, and a move that they stated publicly would bring them closer to the majority of their fans. There's the quiet part out loud again. So when outsiders tell you that Atlanta is a college football city first, they're telling on themselves. Because yes, there are plenty of Bulldogs and Yellow Jackets and a rainbow of other allegiances in the College Football Hall of Fame and on and on and on. I get it. But that's a mindset bred way out of town in the concentric rings of suburbs and exurbs and far, far away from Atlanta, from downtown. It's in places that barely existed before Michael Vick and Matt Ryan were even born. The places that self-incorporated their own municipalities and privatized public services so the railways wouldn't stop in their towns. Basically, if someone tells you their Atlanta doesn't care much about the Falcons, that's a Sandy Springs-ass thing to say.
The fact that Matt Ryan's counterpart in this game is Tom Brady is poetic. Ryan had enrolled at Boston College in 2003, where he spent 5 years. During that time, just 20 miles south in Foxborough, Massachusetts, he witnessed Brady lead his Patriots to Super Bowl titles in each of those first 2 years, and cap it in 2007 with a league MVP in the wake of that aforementioned undefeated regular season. Remember when talking about the '98 Falcons, how Jon mentioned that nearly half the teams in the NFL have never had a single season with at least 14 wins? Well, that was New England's third just during Ryan's time in college, and it propelled their 5-year win total to 66, the most any team ever had in the 16-game era. It was as prolific a half-decade stretch as any quarterback and team has ever had, and it coincided exactly with Ryan's residency in Massachusetts. It's only fitting that in his 5th playoff run, Ryan's chance to complete the total reversal of his personal postseason narrative, the narrative that's dogged him for years, comes against this quarterback and this team. The first 3 times the Falcons made the playoffs under Ryan were wildly disappointing one-and-done affairs. In the 4th, they broke through a bit, but they still blew huge leads in both the divisional round and, in their eventual demise, the NFC Championship game. Now in his 5th go-round, the Falcons have again raced out to big leads, but this time they've had the killer instinct to keep their foot on the gas for all 60 minutes in blowout wins over the Seahawks and Packers. They've finally learned how to close out games once up big. For 2 months, this squad has been untouchable, and their final test also happens to be the greatest test any football team could possibly encounter.
In the days leading up to Super Bowl 51, a couple heroes from the past emerged. One came from ages and ages ago, from an era of Falcons history that most have forgotten. Steve Bartkowski was the first great quarterback the Falcons had ever had. He said he still often thought about that playoff loss that ended their 1980 season, the one in which they'd held a 2-score lead over the Cowboys with just a few minutes left before watching it slip away. Bart and his teammates felt sure they were headed for the Super Bowl. Instead, those Falcons went down in history as a largely forgotten footnote. Now was their chance to win what Bart was after all those decades ago. He predicted a Falcons victory, and was in awe not only of Ryan, but all the weapons he had at his disposal. He aptly used thunder and lightning to describe running backs Devontae Freeman and Tevin Coleman, who'd combined to form a terrific ground game over the last 2 seasons and open up the passing game for Ryan. The Monday before the Super Bowl, a 5,000-word column was published. It was a big, long, remarkable outpouring of regret, grief, pride, gratitude, and love for the Falcons and the city of Atlanta. Its author was Michael Vick. 10 years removed from his final snap as a Falcon, Vick opened up about some things he hadn't previously shared. While in federal prison, he said he desperately clung to the notion that one day he'd find some way to return to the Falcons, quarterback the team he loved, and make things right. In prison, there was little else for him to cling to. A few months into his sentence, he got word that the Falcons had spent their top draft pick on a new quarterback, an unmistakable sign they'd moved on. Vick was crushed. His identity, quarterback, Atlanta Falcons, had vanished. It was the last thing he had left. Michael Vick was only 36 now. In fact, he was considerably younger than the Falcons' opposing quarterback. He was here now as a man who'd committed himself to accounting for his sins and cheering on the quarterback he wished he could have been. Playing in a game he never got to play, Vick had become friends with Matt Ryan. He knew what a Super Bowl win could mean for the city of Atlanta. And he knew Ryan could deliver it. The first year of the Atlanta Falcons had coincided with the first year of the Super Bowl. Those Roman numerals had been keeping time like a grandfather clock. It was counting more than the number of Super Bowl champions. It had been faithfully counting exactly how long the Falcons had been late to the party. And then, one night, it struck 51 o'clock.
Two key starters enter the game with an additional personal motivation, avenging a devastating loss suffered by their iconic fathers in their lone Super Bowl appearances. One is defensive tackle Grady Jarrett, son of none other than Jesse Tuggle. Jarrett will have a chance to finish the job his father so badly wanted to accomplish and came so close to delivering 18 years earlier. A Super Bowl title to the city of Atlanta. The other is Jake Matthews, protector of Matt Ryan's blindside at left tackle. The year after Tuggle's Super Bowl loss, Matthews was a 7-year-old kid in the stands of his future NFL home watching his Hall of Fame dad Bruce, who was on the field at left guard when his Titans came up just a whisker short of forcing overtime on this final play of Super Bowl 34 at the Georgia Dome. Matthews was absolutely determined to have this Super Sunday be a good memory. The Falcons begin the game on defense. It's an extremely young unit that has 2 grizzled vets up front in Dwight Freeney and longtime fan favorite Jonathan Babineau, but is also starting 4 rookies and 3 second-year players. They struggled for the first couple months of the season, but following their Week 11 bye, they made great strides before punking Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers in the playoffs. Up next, Tom Brady. And that precocious, lightning-fast defense picks up right where they left off when they were shutting out the Packers until midway through the third quarter, as star rookie linebacker Deion Jones shoots into the backfield and blows up a 3rd and 1 to force the quick 3-and-out to open the game. Atlanta may have had one of the greatest seasons of offense ever, but they do have to tangle with a stingy New England D that allowed the fewest points in the NFL. Wary of getting burned by Matt Ryan and his plethora of weapons, Patriots defensive coordinator Matt Patricia opens the game showing a too-high safety look with Devontae Freeman taking a beautifully blocked toss sweep 37 yards on the very first Falcons play from scrimmage. The drive stalls, but Atlanta has set the tone early, and their defense forces another New England punt when tight coverage on 3rd down allows enough time for Grady Jarrett to loop around and take Brady down for the drive-killing sack. After the Falcons punt it back, the Patriots are able to create their first big play of the day when Brady hits Julian Edelman for 27 yards to start the second quarter. Atlanta responds the very next snap when Deion Jones rips the ball from the grasp of LeGarrette Blount with corner Robert Alford pouncing on top.
So who's winning? The scoreboard won't tell us, but we have to know. We demand to know what will happen before it happens. You know what we need on this fine February evening in 2017? Projections. They're never wrong. This particular model comes from ESPN. We love to plug the up-and-coming channels, big fans of what they're doing over there, definitely check them out. Now how exactly these projections are calculated we can't say, but so far they're behaving about how we'd expect in the early going. With a limited sample and no actual scoring so far, it's fluctuating. Unsurprisingly though, it really likes this turnover for the Falcons, whose win probability now sits just a bit over 50%.
This is now time for Julio Jones to impose his will on this game. Jones overcomes great coverage and a pass thrown behind him to somehow come down with this 19-yard reception before Ryan immediately finds him again on the boundary for 23 yards. The Pats are now on their heels, which is no way to handle the explosive cutbacks of Freeman, who again exploits Patricia's defense and the light box presented by his too-high safety alignment for a big gain into the red zone. Another nice Freeman cut gets him down inside the 5, and a third finishes off the drive in the end zone to stake the Falcons to a 7-0 lead. The next series, Atlanta's defense produces another 3-and-out, following a textbook open field takedown of slippery running back James White on 3rd down. After 4 series on defense, the Falcons have forced 3 Patriots punts and taken the ball away on a fumble. What more could they possibly do? The Falcons offense takes over, and Kyle Shanahan dials up some easy games of pitch and catch for Ryan and his receivers. First, Taylor Gabriel takes advantage of the Pats' focus on Julio to settle into a huge soft spot in their zone defense for a big pickup. Then off play action, Ryan rolls to his left where Julio's created enough separation at the sideline to make the splendid grab. That sets up this perfect pass from Ryan to rookie tight end Austin Hooper for the score a few plays later. 14-zip Falcons.
Look at this! Our friend here is getting pretty sure of himself. This model actually knows what it's trying to say now. It's putting the Falcons' probability of winning this game at 84.7%. We shouldn't put a whole lot of stock in this yet, since the game's only about a third of the way through, but the stabilization we're seeing here is something to be happy about. After a whole lot of zigging and zagging in the early going, we're seeing steady, consistent improvement. Yeah, familiar story.
When New England takes over, they're able to methodically work the ball downfield, mostly thanks to not 1, not 2, but 3 third-down holding penalties against the Falcons secondary that keep the drive alive. They've reached Atlanta's 23-yard line, where they're threatening to cut the lead in half to make it just a 7-point game. Still, after 27.5 minutes of shutting down and shutting out the Patriots offense, again, what more could this Falcons defense possibly do? How about a score of their own?
Offensive line pass is picked. Intercepted Robert Alford. He's gone.
What we're watching right now from Robert Alford is an 82-yard interception return that is, by at least one reasonable measure, one of the very most impactful individual plays in all of NFL history. You'd expect such a play to be rife with sheer determination and force of will. Nope. Alford has broken so free of everybody that he can afford to cut the engines and savor every last second of it. Pro Football Reference generates a metric called expected points. This metric estimates how many points an offense should be expected to score on a drive before a particular play and after that play. Subtract one from the other and you have a general idea of how much impact that play had. Before that play, this metric expected the Patriots to get approximately 3 points out of this drive. It was 3rd and 6 within field goal range, so that sounds more or less right. The drive, of course, resulted in -7 points for the Patriots, putting the differential of this play at 10.07. Here's the differential of all 8,922 individual plays in Super Bowl history. James Harrison's 100-yard interception return in Super Bowl 43 towers far above all of them at 13.97. It's virtually impossible to swing a game's direction on a single play more than he did. Other memorable plays show up here, like Malcolm Butler's game-sealing interception in Super Bowl 49, but it doesn't rate as high purely in terms of points on the scoreboard. Number 3 all-time, behind only that Harrison pick and a Willie Brown interception of Fran Tarkenton back in Super Bowl 11, is that touchdown we just saw from Robert Alford. This play's place in history can certainly be argued one way or the other, but I think that given that it occurred at a critical juncture in the middle of a Super Bowl, it's reasonable to call this one of the biggest plays we've ever seen.
Momentum is one of those sports cliches that we desperately hold on to. No team can truly possess it. It's more of a feeling than anything tangible that a team can grasp. On that Robert Alford pick six, though, I got that instant suspicion that everything was shifting in favor of Atlanta. This was a young Falcons defense that outperformed expectations thus far, but they were on the verge of finally giving up some sort of points. Instead, they did the exact opposite. Alford read Tom Brady's eyes on the play and jumped the route perfectly. There was nothing but green grass in front of Alford for the return except a lone lineman and Brady. This play was special because Brady really was the last line of defense for the Patriots. The last hope of slowing down a game-changing play is the dude who orchestrated the Patriots' numerous Super Bowl runs. Despite a genuine effort that looked like Brady's brain was still processing how to move his legs as he chugged down the field towards Alford, Tommy dove and completely ate shit. Watching Brady jump headfirst into nothing but grass felt like the Pats' last fleeting effort at stopping the Falcons. To add insult to injury, Alford just cruised into the end zone, skipped across the Falcons logo with so much sauce, then proceeded to throw up an emphatic A-Town down hand gesture. I don't know what came over me, but at that moment, the Falcons' past was wiped from my memory. I didn't think of the what-ifs or the blown leads that this team has been throughout its heart-wrenching history. All I could think to myself was, holy shit, this is really happening. And I know that's how my friends felt as well. We didn't say any words in fear of jinxing anything, but we didn't have to. Everyone had that twinkle in their eye or that ear-to-ear smile like this game was over.
Want to know who didn't have an ear-to-ear smile on his face? This guy, who right about now looks sadder than Ron Swanson being forced to eat a salad for dinner. Finally, on New England's sixth offensive possession, they hit a field goal in the final seconds of the first half. Super Bowl 51 reaches halftime with the Falcons holding a commanding 21-3 lead.
It is pretty hard not to be excited. At halftime, our win probability now sits at 96.2%. The math says we're up huge, and thanks in part to Alford's touchdown, that's exactly how it feels. And if all that isn't enough, we can find even more optimism in the historical record. The Falcons are sitting in the locker room right now with an 18-point lead, which only a handful of other Super Bowl teams have had at halftime. Almost all those games ended up as complete laughers that made the opposing conference look like a minor league. The best news is that throughout the first 50 completed Super Bowls to this point, no team has come back from a halftime deficit of more than 7 points. Teams that have brought a 2-score lead into halftime are a perfect 26-0. The Falcons, they have a 3-score lead, something so rarely seen in a Super Bowl that we need to expand the sample. Here's every post-merger game in both the regular season and playoffs in which a team brought a lead of at least 3 scores into the half. Any pollster in the country would call this district for the Falcons. Teams with a halftime lead of at least 17 points have 1,839 wins against 77 losses for a win percentage of .960. Would you look at that? Both the results of the past and the algorithm of the future have come to near identical conclusions. Yes, these are the Falcons. Yes, we've seen their leads evaporate before. Tell you what, let's make a deal. If we can get through a decent chunk of the second half without disaster striking, then we can celebrate. Fingers crossed.
There is pretty much nothing to complain about. Continuing its incredible run, the Falcons' defense has outscored the Patriots' offense, and on the other side of the ball, Matt Ryan has masterfully spread the ball around in generating a perfect passer rating to complement their ground game, which has been the driving force of their offensive success, both through its direct production and with said production compelling the Pats to bite on play action, thus creating open passing windows. New England seems to have honed in on that issue in the locker room, because on the very first play of the third quarter, linebacker Dante Hightower destroys a block to slam Freeman down for a 3-yard loss, which leads to a punt. It just simply doesn't appear to matter. When the Patriots get the ball back, even the normally reliable and sure-handed as they come Julian Edelman drops this third down pass to give the ball right back to Atlanta. On the Falcons' first play, Julio runs vertically right up the seam to clear out the middle of the field for Gabriel to pick up another chunk play against a soft zone. 2 plays later, Gabriel jukes corner Malcolm Butler out of his cleats to get wide open for a 35-yard gain. The next beneficiary of Jones's presence is Mohamed Sanu, who capitalizes on his one-on-one matchup thanks to a corner and both safeties triple teaming Julio downfield. The Pats have to hold the Falcons to just a field goal here to keep it from becoming a 4-score game, and it looks like they do when Butler breaks up this third down pass, but he gets flagged for interference, which sets Atlanta up with a fresh set of downs from the 6. From there, Tevin Coleman beats linebacker Rob Ninkovich to the flat and takes the swing pass in for the touchdown to begin the coronation. 28-3.
We have been eating up win probability like a toddler clawing into birthday cake, and our only regret is that there's so little left that you can't be more than 100% certain to win a football game. With about 8 minutes left in the third, we now sit at 99.4%. These are Lysol numbers.
I high-fived Gordon Ramsay on the way to the bathroom. It's just one of the strange things about the Super Bowl is that there's a weird overage of like mid-tier celebrities, usually associated or connected to whatever network is airing the game, and they're just milling around with minimal security. Once Coleman scored and all the pressure released, I knew it was okay to use the bathroom, to stretch my legs, and to grab a bottle of water in advance of the celebrating that I would do later in the evening. I was in full stride to the bathroom, saw Gordon Ramsay, and screamed, "Hey chef, we're winning the fucking Super Bowl!" I have no particular opinion about Gordon Ramsay either way, but there he was. The in-person Super Bowl experience is pretty terrible, but it inadvertently achieves these surreal moments. It's like when you have a dream that doesn't make sense and some famous person you're not connected to shows up. You feel like you're trapped in a casino and you're sucking in all that compressed oxygen. As a football fan, I'm less of a believer in the momentum cliche as I am in the one about winning in all phases. So in the bathroom, my casino brain told me that the Falcons had now created a scoring drive after whatever halftime adjustments New England had made. Plus, we'd stopped the opponent's drives through almost 3 quarters, and we'd even scored points on defense. I could not reach for a single area or item to worry about, which was the reflexive response to any temporary Falcon success in my entire life. What I remember feeling, and what I said to my friend when I was back at our seats, was that I didn't think we could lose, because it wasn't just one thing. I actually said out loud, at this point, they'd have to beat us at everything.
In this exact same moment, just before 9 o'clock, someone else decides to get up and do a little walking himself. At his Super Bowl party within one of his various golf clubs in Florida, with his precious Patriots getting beat to shit, sad Donald Trump gets up from his seat, leaves his own sorry excuse for a party, and goes home with his tail between his legs, likely pondering how to get the stolen result overturned. There's now only a quarter and a half left, and New England, trailing by 25, takes their sweet time trying to mount their first touchdown drive. Following a few short, underneath passes and running plays, the Patriots face a third down. Desperate to get something going, they opt for some trickery, with Brady tossing a lateral to Edelman and the collegiate quarterback firing deep but unable to connect with Dion Lewis. On fourth down, a Brady completion to Danny Amendola delays the Hammer's descent on their coffin's final nail. A minute later, when third down again pops up, the Pats again resort to an unorthodox tactic. Brady dusting off his creaky 39-year-old wheels to pick up the first. The Patriots maintain a startling lack of urgency as they keep that clock right on rolling with another 3 consecutive running plays. It's as though winning is so unrealistic, their decision-making is geared towards simply losing by a more respectable amount. Because after burning 6.5 minutes on the drive, even though Brady and White eventually get the Patriots into the end zone for the first time, there are only 17 minutes remaining, and the Falcon lead is still 18 points. Oh, excuse me.
This one hits the upright.
That's right, 19. Not only that, after we're treated to the Patriots' near unprecedented pre-fourth quarter non-surprise onside kick, the Falcons' recovery sets them up right on the outskirts of field goal range. One play later, okay, now they're in scoring range for their Pro Bowl kicker. Alrighty, I think we're all caught up.
Remember our deal. At halftime, we said that if we ate through a good chunk of the second half without incident, it was party time. Well, it is party time. We enter the half of the 3-score lead, and with a quarter of change left to play, we've still got that 3-score lead. We also have the ball in field goal range. All those little elves in the projection machine see the exact same thing we do. We're now enjoying a view from 99.5%. This is a stake through the heart. The Patriots have lost Super Bowls before, but those were nail-biters. This is a 1980s-style Joe Montana bulldozing. Their ageless dynasty is ending here, tonight. And it's time to wonder whether the next super team will be the one who threw the brakes on them. Could the Falcons be the new superpower? Their quarterback and wide receiver are blossoming as all-time greats. They're still a very young team at the skill positions. Their defense is making Tom Brady look like a backup, and their coach has put all this together in just year 2. Dynasty is a big word, but the Atlanta Falcons have waited for this for half a century. This is their time.
With the clock ticking, Shanahan wants to keep it ticking, and while a handoff to Coleman gets stuffed, even worse is a Jake Matthews hold that pushes him back 10 yards, a bit out of field goal range. Unfortunate, but no big deal, it's still just second down. To the extent it even matters, Atlanta has 2 more shots to get just a handful of yards for a chance to further run up the score with a field goal try. On second down, Ryan eludes Jabal Sheard's grasp and fires a pass to Hooper that nearly gets those yards, if not for Patrick Chung's late jarring loose of the ball. Another breakdown in protection on third down does result in a sack that keeps the Falcons without points and hands the ball back to New England to kick off quarter number 4. After a couple minutes, Brady's matriculated the ball down to the Falcons' 32, where, facing a key third and short, he decides to toss a risky deep ball into tight coverage that drops perfectly into the hands of Martellus Bennett to set up a first and goal inside the 10. As unlikely as it seems, if the Pats can get a touchdown here, there's a chance they can pull within 11 and somehow have a morsel of life. But not if Jesse Tuggle's kid has anything to say about it. On first down, Jarrett unleashes an overwhelming bull rush to record his second sack of the evening. After a short pass brings up third down, this time deceptive quickness and a devastating swim move enable Grady to take down Brady for a Super Bowl record-tying third time. So nope, New England doesn't even capitalize on that golden opportunity as Atlanta holds them to a measly field goal and are now set to get the ball back up 2 touchdowns and 2 two-point conversions with just 9 minutes and change remaining. The Falcons lean on Tevin Coleman to chew up clock, handing him the ball twice for 9 yards. But on the latter carry, he injures his ankle, so Devontae Freeman enters the game for a huge 3rd and 1. The Patriots rush 5, with Freeman responsible to pick up the blitzing Dante Hightower, but he completely whiffs his pass protection assignment, which leads to a Hightower strip sack of Ryan and a gigantic momentum swing. Not only is it now Patriots ball with a short field, but look what would have happened had Freeman bought his quarterback just one more beat. The Patriots had lined up playing a cover 1 man-to-man defense with safety Devin McCourty over the top doubling Julio, who split wide to the left. That meant slot receiver Aldrick Robinson had a one-on-one matchup with no safety help, and he torched Malcolm Butler deep downfield, which is exactly where Ryan was winding up to throw. Instead of delivering the TKO, the Falcons just took a punch below the belt that has them at least a little wobbly.
I don't know. Don't let Alex scare you that much. A turnover deep in your own territory is one of the worst things that can happen to you on a single play, so let's see how that impacts our win probability. It dropped from 99.6% to 97.3%. That's it. All that's going on here is that the Patriots are trying to chop down the deficit so it doesn't look so bad in the history books. Remember those touchdowns the Falcons scored at the end of Super Bowl 33? Those made the final score a somewhat respectable 34-19 instead of 34-6. That's what we're seeing now. As fun as it would have been to beat the Patriots, say 35-3, this is the way it was always likely to go.
Yeah, that lead they built was so enormous, they still are firmly in the driver's seat. As long as Atlanta's defense, flying higher than Cheech and Chong all game, allows anything other than a touchdown and successful 2-point conversion, they will maintain a decisive 2-score lead in the waning minutes. However, the game's last 4 possessions have featured 2 lengthy Patriots drives in which they ran a combined 24 plays, and 2 brief Falcons drives in which they ran a combined 6. Quickly thrust back on the field, Dan Quinn's defense is exhausted. And yet, a nearly 37-year-old Dwight Freeney, unfooled by play action, is still able to muster enough juice to speed past tackle Nate Solder as their relentless pass rush is able to land one more haymaker. But a couple plays later on 3rd and long, Brady attacks seldom used converted receiver CJ Goodwin in coverage, with his completion to Malcolm Mitchell picking up just enough yardage to move the chains. From there, Brady zeroes in on the slot matchup of Danny Amendola running a quick out versus Jalen Collins to get near the end zone. Then into the end zone. The Falcons were not able to prevent a touchdown, but remember, they can still render that pretty much moot if their worn-out defense can summon the strength to make just one more play and keep the Pats from converting their 2-pointer. But they can't. James White takes the direct snap and powers in as Atlanta's massive 25-point lead has dwindled to 8. Folks, Super Bowl 51 has become a downright nail-biter. The stretch run of this game is no longer a Falcons coronation. No longer are they in the driver's seat cruising without a care in the world toward the Lombardi Trophy. The only thing they are in is a fight for their Super Bowl lives.
Okay, alright, listen. I'm sure imaginations are running wild at this point. You're allowing yourself to be emotionally swayed by momentum, but as for me, I trust the data. I'm a little bit of a numbers guy. And you know what the numbers are saying? That the Falcons hold an 89.9% chance of winning.
When their offense takes over, they're able to settle down a bit when the Pats D starts off the ensuing drive by leaving Freeman all by his lonesome as he takes a little dump off from Ryan, eventually makes a man miss, and nearly reaches midfield, atoning ever so slightly for his disastrous last play. 2 snaps later, Ryan, under heavy pressure, climbs the pocket but has no open receivers to throw to. For some reason, he decides to pass to Julio Jones. Normally a very sound strategy, but cornerback Eric Rowe here could not possibly have better coverage. It is a physical impossibility. He's located at the precise spot where you would draw it up to take away any and all passing windows to Julio. Matt Ryan does not care. He creates a window that simply does not exist out of thin air and somehow, some way places the ball just beyond the outstretched arm of Rowe and within the last possible millimeter of Julio's catch radius. An otherworldly throw to be sure, but this is still a near impossible ball for Jones to actually haul in and secure. Well shit, fine, but there's definitely no way he's going to be able to also have the balance, body control, and presence of mind while making this circus catch to be able to tap that right foot inbounds and not lose control of the ball as he goes to the ground. Jiminy H. Christmas. Julio Jones basically just broke science and reason and made every single jaw hit the floor from sea to shining sea. And you know what? Many will agree that this is not the most supernatural catch that's gonna occur here tonight. It does, however, set the Falcons up well in field goal range. From down at New England's 22, it'd be about a 40-yard attempt, even if they don't gain another yard. With a kicker as outstanding as Matt Bryant's been all season, success on such a try would be extremely likely. And any points on this drive will throw cold water on New England's valiant comeback attempt, because now there are under 5 minutes to play.
See? What'd I tell you? Right back to where we were, 98.1%. The Falcons have an 8-point lead with the ball in field goal range with under 5 minutes left. On top of that, they've made 2 huge plays on this drive. A 39-yarder that's the biggest gain from scrimmage of the night by either team, followed up almost immediately by one of the most spectacular catches in Super Bowl history. So you've got that precious momentum that you were so concerned about a minute ago. Enjoy this. We've earned it. Don't let him take it from you. Not even for a moment.
While the Patriots snuff out a toss to Freeman that pushes him back a yard, who cares? It also keeps the clock ticking, taking it down under 4 minutes. If the Falcons run it 2 more times and kick, they will compel Belichick to burn a couple of his timeouts before getting the ball back with just a few minutes left, likely down multiple scores. Instead, Shanahan puts the ball in the league MVP's hands, expecting a certain defensive coverage that would result in a quick, easy completion. But the Patriots surprise him with a different look that forces Ryan to hang on to the ball a while. Trey Flowers is able to blow up the play by beating All-Pro center Alex Mack, who's gutting through the game on a broken leg, and sacks Ryan way back at the 35. New England uses a timeout, but with a 12-yard loss moving the ball back to an area where a field goal attempt would be much trickier, that trade-off is a very painful one for Atlanta. Now the Falcons have a real urgency to pick up at least 5 or 10 yards or so on 3rd down to make Bryant's potential game-clinching kick easier. And Mo Sanu gets those yards to set up what should be a 44-yard celebration-starting field goal. Oh no. For the second time in his last 12 snaps, Jake Matthews has held a Patriot to knock Atlanta out of field goal range. Absolutely brutal 19-yard swing. Ryan and Gabriel can't quite connect at the sideline on a pass that could have set up a long field goal try, and a drive poised to end in a short field goal that would have put the Lombardi Trophy on ice instead ends in terrifying fashion. A punt to give the ball to Tom Brady with 3.5 minutes left and 2 timeouts in a 1-possession game.
95%. I can live with that. Can you? I mean, that punt pinned Brady all the way back at his own 9-yard line. The algorithm correctly understands how dire that is for him.
On first down, Grady Jarrett loops around the edge to continue his rampage against Brady and nearly ends things with this hit, forcing him to toss up a duck that lands in the middle of 3 red jerseys. For Brian Poole in particular, it may have been the easiest interception of his life had he not lost his footing at the last second. After another incompletion brings up 3rd and 10, Brady's able to find Chris Hogan for a gain of 16 to keep the drive alive. The very next play, Robert Alford deflects a pass to Julian Edelman up in the air that again could end things if only another Falcon were in the vicinity. Never in any of the other 145 games the two played together did Brady ever throw more than 4 consecutive incompletions to Edelman. But here in Super Bowl 51, that marked Brady's 7th pass in a row to his longtime trusty slot receiver that fell incomplete. Then following an 11-yard reception by Mitchell that picks up another Patriots first down, an undeterred Brady drops back and throws a risky downfield pass headed straight toward Julian Edelman. But it's just not that duo's day. Alford's again right there and nearly makes the interception, but has to settle for another deflection. The 3rd time in 6 plays this drive, the ball has been tantalizingly popped up in the air, only this time he's got backup. Quickly converging at the scene are safeties Keanu Neal and Ricardo Allen, both in position to make a play on the ball as it flutters down. Edelman is too, and amid this absurd mishmash of bodies, he nearly makes a pretty silly catch before Alford's left leg in his face complicates the effort and it slips just through his grasp. But the football doesn't hit the turf. Nope, it hits Alford's right leg and bounces back up. For those scoring at home, that's all 4 of his extremities that have now played a key role in this football staying alive. Edelman's able to miraculously secure the rebound while keeping it just barely above the ground thanks to some help from Allen's arm, but with Alford sticking his left foot in his face, that again complicates the effort and the ball squirts out of his hands. It almost just hovers in place there an inch or so above the turf, just hanging out until Edelman's good and ready to regain control and pin it against his body. That is the catch that ended what was by far the worst stretch of futility of the Brady-Edelman connection.
A fundamental difference between God and Satan is that Satan signs his work. A beautiful sunset could be God, could be a lot of other things. The devil leaves no room for doubt. This is a satanic demonstration. Marooned in desperate circumstances, Brady had been going for broke at the roulette table this entire drive. 3 times he served up incredibly dangerous throws, practically begging the football gods to strike him down. But he's just not being allowed to fail. This wasn't anyone's fault. The only thing Robert Alford didn't do was pull down an extraordinarily difficult interception. In any normal circumstance, simply breaking up the pass would be enough. In case it wasn't, both Keanu Neal and Ricardo Allen dove in and did everything in their power to make it impossible to catch this football. Julian Edelman did catch it, thanks to otherworldly instincts, but it was made possible by the brutality of dumb luck. There's no human being you can blame. There's no plan you can draw up to prevent this from happening again. There's nothing to add. There's nothing to do but record that it happened. Time for the computer to tell us how bad to feel. Wait, that's it? It's still giving the Falcons 92.6%? Are we sure about that? Yeah, look, no, that's what it says. Are we sure that reflects their odds after the play happened? I think it's worked that way the whole game, but maybe something got screwed up. I don't know, let's skip ahead 1 play just to be sure. It drops a little, but it's still at about 85%. This can't be... Is this right? This can't be right. Has this thing been watching? Has it seen the devil's hand in this game? There's something wrong with this projection. There has to be. Oh, God. How long has it been wrong?
With the Falcons' pass rush now running on fumes, things are simply way too easy for Brady, who's able to sit in the pocket and wait until Amendola's crossing route clears the robber's zone to pick up another 20 yards. James White then takes an underneath pass down inside the 10 and immediately after does so again, moving it to the 1 yard line. If ever a defense were going to pull a heroic goal line stand out of their ass, it's not going to be one this completely gassed. The next play, White meets little resistance as he barrels into the end zone.
Touchdown, James White!
The Falcons, after every single torturous, agonizing thing that has happened to them since building a 28-3 lead, still have not blown the entire thing. Up 28-26, there remains a prime chance here to totally redeem themselves and absolve everything. If they can just stop the Patriots' upcoming 2-point conversion attempt, they will put themselves within an onside kick recovery of a world championship. Okay, here we go. Brady takes the snap and throws a quick screen to Amendola with Hogan and Edelman in front, responsible for blocking Collins and Alford. Collins quickly sheds Hogan's block, and he and Brian Poole charge toward Amendola, colliding right at the goal line. But by a matter of inches, the ball breaks the plane. 25-point lead, totally and completely eradicated.
%39%? No. Oh, God. Oh, God, no. Fuck!
Atlanta does have an opportunity to respond with a last-second game-winning drive, but a poor kick return starts them off at their own 11, and they're not able to move the 50 yards in 50 seconds that they need to reach field goal range. For the first time ever, the Super Bowl is headed to overtime. Only twice all season had the Falcons' offense failed to score on 4 consecutive drives. When that occurred for the third time down the stretch here, it happened to perfectly align with their defense allowing 3 touchdowns, 2 2-point conversions, and a field goal across the 4 drives they were on the field. Of the final 8 possessions in Super Bowl 51 regulation, the Falcons went 0 for 8 as to the combination of their offense generating a score or their defense generating a stop. If we toss out Atlanta's final drive, since there wasn't much time left when they took over, that's still 0 for 7 when 1 for 7 would have sufficed. Or shit, even 0 for 7's fine if it could have been accompanied with stopping just one of the 2 2-pointers. But nope, we can't have it.
In most other sports, if a game is tied at the end of regulation, an additional full period of play is added. 5 minutes in the NBA, 30 minutes in soccer, a full inning in baseball. Others use sudden death, in which the game immediately stops at the next score. This format makes some sense in a sport like hockey, in which both teams typically possess the puck many times before anybody scores. It makes no sense in football, in which an offense tends to score roughly once every 3 times they have the ball. The NFL adopted sudden death in playoff games in 1946, and it's never looked back. Recently, they did offer one concession that makes it more confusing and about 10% less stupid. If the team that gets the ball first is held to just a field goal, the game doesn't immediately end, and the other team at least has a chance to answer back. Even then, the team that gets the ball first is gifted with an enormous advantage. If they score a touchdown, they win the game without their opponent ever getting the ball. How do they decide which team gets the ball first? A coin flip. And who wins the coin flip? Who do you think? Who the hell do you think? Look at Matt Ryan. He won't even look at it. I think he knew. I think this is when we all knew.
I decided the confetti would not touch me. That was the line that I drew. That was the one indignity that I refused in my entire life as an Atlanta Falcons fan. The bags released from the NRG Stadium ceiling, and I just started hopping along empty seats around and through Patriots fans, behind Falcons fans doing the same thing, abandoning the sight of what had happened as fast as damn possible. This manic exit is probably the most athletic feat of my adult life. The dry heaving started as soon as I got to the concourse. One of the official partners of the Super Bowl was Uber, but the service itself was a nightmare to navigate. Thousands of people wandered through the different layers of security around the stadium because you just don't enter or exit the stadium at the Super Bowl. You go through tiers of checkpoints like customs. This system was implemented after 9/11 to slow mass migration in any one direction and to potentially pocket or seal off a crowd from a targeted event. I waited for an Uber for 55 minutes in a single file line. I read apologetic texts from family and members. In front of me was a man, probably in his early 20s, dressed in a personalized black Falcons jersey with the nameplate Harambe and a 00. For close to an hour, I stood in total silence behind Harambe, behind a man who'd spent at least $200 to take a humorless internet meme public, a man no greater or less my peer, who chose to embrace both this game and its aftermath with tasteless indifference. He laughed. He bummed cigarettes, he drank from a plastic flask, and at one point he farted loudly before screaming, "Safety! Great tragedies demand great endings." And instead, I was delivered Harambe, the asshole, a funhouse version of my fandom laughing at the most ruinous investment of my life. The ROI on cheering for the Atlanta Falcons is as poor as any lovable loser in sports history. The Cubs, or Maple Leafs, or even the godforsaken New Orleans Saints themselves. But there is no love. For generations of lazy sports writers, there is no easy hook to love Atlanta. A city too hot, too young, too black, and too transient. Falcons fandom is worse than sunk cost fallacy. No one understands why you invested anything in the first place. I do not mourn February 5th, 2017 because we lost the Super Bowl. I mourn it because I lost the chance to stop. I have to keep going because I believe at some point this franchise will hand its fans something to show for all of this. Even after this moment, the greatest, cruelest act possible in NFL history. We are only losers, even when we're winning, because the sheer absurdity of this franchise is anathema to empathy. The Falcons will build and break and build and break in increasingly spectacular ways. Very few people love them. Most will not care at all. Maybe their real failure is the inability to explain exactly how and why the hell they are capable of this.
At this point, I found myself constantly looking down to the ground. It was partly due to me not wanting to witness what potentially came next, but I also just couldn't escape my own thoughts. I'm typically not a superstitious guy when it comes to sports, but at this moment, with everything going to shit, I just couldn't stop looking down at my feet. Throughout the whole playoff run and most of the season, I watched a ton of games at various sports bars. Some of these bars can get a little grimy with bar tar on the floor, and I never wanted to fuck up my nice shoes, so I always wore some beat up black boots. I saw the Falcons demolish teams all year while wearing these awful rundown pair of boots. On this night though, surrounded by friends, watching the game comfortably inside a home, I decided to flex a little. So I brought out my red and black Jordan 12 Retro Flu games. I must admit, I was looking very clean, but there I was, staring at my feet, thinking I personally caused all of this to happen because I wasn't wearing those damn boots. I know I mentioned earlier, unlike politics, as a fan, we have little control over how a team performs. Except, I couldn't shake the feeling that I somehow jinxed the Falcons by not wearing those boots. These were legit thoughts in my head. I would look up at the screen after each play, then right back down to my shoes. Am I responsible for us blowing this lead? Sports can be sick, and there I was, twisting my mind into thinking that what went down was somehow all my fault. Maybe it was. I don't know, man.
A huge reason why Super Bowl 51 felt over the instant that OT coin toss landed heads up was because it meant a Falcons D that had absolutely nothing left in the tank. After what was already a grueling regulation workload, one unlike any other in Super Bowl history, had to go right back on the field to start the extra frame. And because the suits who run the league think something like the flip of a coin should play an outsized role in determining its Super Bowl champion, another 8 plays by their defense, without a chance for their offense to respond, launched them to another stratosphere. The Falcons' defense ultimately spent a whopping 93 plays on the field, more than twice as many as their offense did. They didn't stand a chance in overtime.
At age 39, Tom Brady won his 5th Super Bowl that night. The next year, he returned to the Super Bowl and lost. The year after that, at age 41, he won his 6th Super Bowl, which was held in the Falcons Stadium. He played his final game for the Patriots in 2019. As a postscript, he signed with the Buccaneers, a team that hadn't made a single playoff appearance in the previous 13 years, and immediately won his 7th Super Bowl at age 43. As the 2021 season nears, odds makers are favoring him to return to the Super Bowl again. He is 44 years old. I suppose it will all make sense when we grow up. We really couldn't have anything. Whittling down our dreams earned us nothing. Asking politely instead of demanding got us nowhere. Our ambitions got smaller and smaller until they became, please let anyone else into the White House, anyone but him. The answer was no, so we whittled further, way down, until one night the prize in play was table scraps. The result of a fucking football game that would give us something to feel good about as we did the dishes and surrendered to the cold, dark Monday morning ahead. After a half-century as a curiosity off in the periphery, a thing far removed from the real world, the Falcons really did get a chance to matter for one night. They drew one of the largest audiences, not only in sports history, but in human history, only to theatrically shit themselves and die. It wasn't just that we couldn't have it, it was that we were allowed to see what we couldn't have for just long enough to accept it, before it was taken away. It was a joke. It was nothing more than a joke. And it was a joke told perfectly. The Atlanta Falcons were at it again. Now, while you might agree that this whole thing was funny, you might just perceive it as schadenfreude. I'm sorry, that is too pedestrian for this. The humor is so much more artfully crafted, and it demands so much more respect. We've seen them working on the routine for a very long time. In the early decades, they were funny on account of their simple ineptitude, slipping on banana peels and stepping on garden rakes, but in Norm Van Brocklin, they also gave us an Archie Bunker type who flew off the handle and said ridiculous things, often seemingly out of boredom. Later in their adolescence, we saw them sometimes try way too hard as they kinda learned the ropes of comedy, but they also began to master the art of slapstick, and they understood the humor in breaking the rules for the sake of doing so. And on the field, they pulled off a stunt so disrespectful and rude that we're still laughing at it 30 years later. From there, they went to Super Bowl 33, and they spent the weeks leading up to it putting on a 3-ring circus, each one evoking a specific kind of humor. The airplane debacle could have been a Curb Your Enthusiasm episode. The dumb, protracted Dan Reeves drama was straight out of Real Housewives, and that Eugene Robinson incident reminded us of every time we've seen a political career go down in flames. We then began laughing at the Falcons out of sheer disbelief. When we saw Michael Vick do some of the things he did, we could only cackle at it. The sort of sharp, abrupt cackle you let loose without meaning to when you watch a ridiculous TikTok. It was the comedy of total astonishment. When Jim Mora hit AM airwaves that day in 2006, we got the full shock jock experience. A guy who got fired because he went on the radio and just could not stop talking. When things became truly, genuinely sad, the day was saved just in time by a one-of-a-kind individual, a truly remarkable man who secured his legacy as America's clown laureate. And when the Falcons finally settled down off the field, appearing to at long last grow up well into their 40s, they gave us on-field debacles that could have been jackass bits. Hi, I'm Matt Bosher, and this is the onside kick while we're leading. Hi, I'm Dan Quinn, and this is the field goal when we're down by 4. But this time they wrote an entire allegory. They scooped our big shared nightmare up from November and played it out in miniature. The creator of this algorithm later said he believed it was a little overconfident, but the fault is really in how we read these things. It never got higher than 99.7%, and 99.7% is not 100%. That 0.3% chance of losing is small, but it's real. Charles Babbage was the inventor of the analytical engine, a machine he never completely finished prior to his death in 1871. More than once, someone asked him whether the machine would spit out the correct answer even if someone entered the wrong numbers. He was confounded by how stupid of a question that was, but it's still not that far off from where most of us are at. We don't understand numbers nearly as well as we think we do. In reality, there was one open manhole in town and we just happened to fall into it. Just like we did in November. But did our Falcon really have to trace it this well? We don't even need to squeeze the dimensions, we can just take 2 screenshots and slap them on top of each other. They even correctly timed exactly when the bottom should fall out. The New York Times confidently projected victory for the Dems and everything changed around 9 p.m. ESPN confidently projected victory for the Falcons, and everything changed around 9 p.m. In both cases, there's no gradual decline. 1 hour was a sure thing. 1 hour later, it was impossible. That's not the only commentary offered up by our big fella, though. That overtime coin toss essentially restarted the entire contest under rules that resulted in Matt Ryan, the league MVP, never even touching the football. One of the NFL's most consequential rules is unbelievably stupid. This is one of the only things that almost all NFL fans agree on. We all know how unbalanced and stupid it is. The powers that be know exactly how unbalanced and stupid it is. They've known for a long time, as evidenced by the tweaks they've tried to make to the rule. But despite the availability of clear, proven alternatives, it never fundamentally changes. We're stuck with it for no good reason. Similarly, polling indicates that the majority of Americans feel that the Electoral College is stupid, and rightly so. Because of it, Trump became the second of the last 3 presidents to enter office having lost the popular vote. How dumb this is has been widely understood for a very, very long time. It's an awful way to decide a winner. That winner of 2016-2017, the glaring inadequacies of both systems were shown in the starkest terms, on the biggest possible stages. But there's no reason to believe they'll change in the foreseeable future. We're stuck with them. And you know what? We knew it going in. If you want to win, take care of business in Michigan. If you want to win, take care of business in regulation. Yeah, it's a dumb system. It's not fair. Tough shit. The remarkable craftsmanship of this joke doesn't even stop there. It's perfectly in step with the comedy of the times. Remember how so much topical humor was prefabricated at this point? We tried to build upon it and claim some part of it, but we just couldn't. There was nothing to do but simply repeat it. Football fans haven't stopped laughing at this game, and they probably won't for a very long time. But do they point out specific things about it? Do they bring up any specific plays? Do they make funny photoshops? No, not really. All we do is say 28-3. That's it. That's all we gotta do. Look at a YouTube comments section or the replies to any Falcons tweet. We just repeat it. It's all we do, because we understand there's nothing of value to add. It's already finished. And finally, again keeping with the comedic style of the time, it happened by accident. Were there disastrous mistakes and poor decisions? Sure, of course, but the game fundamentally hinged on things like that coin toss and that Edelman catch that they had no control over. Things that were just plain unlucky. It was comedy minus a comedian. At least not in human form. There was nothing funny about the performance of Matt Ryan, who did almost everything right. There were certainly fair critiques to be made of Dan Quinn and Kyle Shanahan that night, but they didn't make any single infamous gaffe that went down in history. General Manager Thomas Dimitroff and owner Arthur Blank took a business-like, laser-focused approach toward building this organization into a contender. All of these people were powerless. You know who this is? This big old bird is a spiritual totem, a trickster god who answers to no mortal. What you hold dear is what he finds funny. Your ambitions are his trinkets, his curiosities. He will win, but only in the service of a good laugh. He is restless. He became so bored that he drew himself. I bet he was second-guessing himself, though. When he went in costume and dressed up as a great, normal team shortly after the election, he probably thought, there's no way they're buying this. They've seen me do this before. This won't work. But it did. We fell for it. He waited for exactly the right point in history. For the one politically charged opponent. The one moment we'd all get on board with him. It was tremendous execution. He got us good. Oh, don't give us that look. Oh, who, me? Yes, you. God, you're an asshole. I love you, but you're an asshole. The gig was up now, and he knew it. This Falcons reputation was cemented. He was no deadly, stone-cold predator. He was our big, goofy fucking football bird, and there was no use in hiding it any longer. He wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. For his next trick, a sight gag. Here he packs as much Atlanta as you can possibly fit on one screen. There's the Weather Channel, a proud Atlanta institution. There's the Georgia Dome, home of the Falcons. There's the controlled demolition of the Georgia Dome, signifying Atlanta's inability to stop compulsively rebuilding itself. At this moment, the Georgia Dome is only 25 years old. There might well be actual Falcons who have lived longer than that. And finally, here's this poor cameraman's day being ruined by what always ruins your day in Atlanta. Traffic.
Get out of the way, boss! Are you...
Right after their defeat in Super Bowl 51, the Falcons moved into the brand new state-of-the-art Mercedes-Benz Stadium they built next door. It's really imposing in person. I'm no architecture critic, but geometrically it looks so cool. It's sharp and distinct, and it looks like there was real imagination behind it. Thing is, it has a nickname, Megatron's Butthole. Deadspin gave it that name years ago when they first released concept art. I don't know, I know we like laughing at the Falcons, but we really don't need to reach, and that seems like a little bit of a reach. There's so much else about this team that's worth making fun of that there's really no need. Oh, that's that's a butthole. That is a butthole. It opens and closes like a butthole. They spent $1.6 billion to build the world's biggest butthole. No one in the room said anything, or maybe they did and they were just ignored. What has gotten into you? What are you doing? You used to be subtle. You don't even care anymore. You don't even care anymore, do you? This is, in fact, when our Falcons stopped caring about his little self-portrait. He was supposed to win games and taper in. Instead, despite retaining just about all the key talent from that Super Bowl team, he went that way. In recent years, something has fundamentally broken inside this team. It's not the quantity of their losses, it's the quality. They just continue to invent new ways to lose a football game. One might point to the Super Bowl as the moment it snapped, but I think it happened that Sunday evening in 2013 when they accidentally booted that onside kick at the end of that playoff game they were winning. Ever since, they've made artwork out of losing, blowing a 17-0 lead in the NFC Championship and later kicking a field goal at the 1 when they were down by 4. There was also that game-losing pick 2, the first and only one of its kind that would turn out to be their final loss until Super Bowl 51. Those unfamiliar with the modern Falcons might think we're playing this up, that we've gotten ourselves stuck telling the story of this team so we have to exaggerate. How many different ways can you lose a football game after all? Well, my friend, just sit back and enjoy. Allow them to demonstrate.
Coming off that season of immense success by the 2016 Falcons offense, Kyle Shanahan had landed the 49ers head coaching gig, and without him it regressed to the middle of the pack the next season under new coordinator Steve Sarkisian. But their young defense soared and developed into a top 10 unit, so this was still a very good team that went 10-6 and nabbed a playoff spot. The Falcons flew to Los Angeles on Wild Card Weekend, where they soundly beat the Rams to earn Matt Ryan his first career playoff win outside the Georgia Dome. That earned him a trip to his native Philly for the divisional round, where just before halftime they're playing well and have a 4-point lead. Eagles fill-in quarterback Nick Foles is trying to mount a last-second field goal drive when he fires an errant pass that sails straight toward Keanu Neal. If Neal secures this gimme interception, he'll not only kill that threat, but he'll have a chance for a big return that could increase Atlanta's lead at the break. Instead, the ball ricochets off his knee and bounces up the other direction. But an incompletion at least probably still ensures Philly won't be scoring either. And they could have done without that. Following Torrey Smith's reception from the heavens to reach midfield, another 15-yard pickup leaves 1 second on the clock, and a long field goal cuts Atlanta's lead to 1. So fast forward to just a minute left in the game. The Falcons are down 5 instead of 2 with the ball on 4th and goal. Forced to go for it, the timing between Ryan and Jones gets disrupted when Julio slips, and they're unable to recover. Falcons lose. Perhaps if they'd only been down 2 instead of 5, they could have simply kicked a likely game-winning field goal. But alas, the Falcons' downslide had now been sparked. Their descent over the ensuing 2 years with a couple 7-9 seasons was disappointing and featured their share of maddening losses. But they weren't completely out of control. The bottom hadn't completely fallen out. In 2020, the bottom completely fell out, starting with a Week 2 game in Dallas. Atlanta jumps out to a 20-0 first quarter lead and still has a 2-score advantage and the ball with under 5 minutes to play. The Cowboys eventually get the ball back and score with just a minute and change left. But the beauty of the late multi-score lead is that the only way to lose is if you botch an onside kick recovery. An unlikely occurrence, but that occasionally happens when the ball slips through a player's fingers or pops free when hit. No team has ever botched an onside recovery like this, though. The ball has to travel 10 yards before the kicking team can recover, but no such rule applies to the receiving team, and every Falcon just sits around waiting and watching with their front row seat until it travels the necessary distance for Dallas to then pounce on. Good work, fellas. As if there were any doubt, the Cowboys march down and kick the game-winning field goal. At home the next week, I shit you not, the very next week, this same team now has a 16-point lead, the ball, and 10 minutes on the clock. Nearly identical circumstances as one of their likeliest moments to win Super Bowl 51. 4 years later, here's their chance at a mulligan. The Falcons take that chance and somehow find a way to allow 3 touchdowns down the stretch, one of which is thanks to multiple Falcons each forgetting the NFL is not two-hand touch, and lose. Spectacular. So congratulations to the Atlanta Falcons, who have become the first team to ever drop back-to-back games in which they held a fourth quarter lead of at least 15 points. What embarrassments for their fans to have to endure in such a short period of time. Can't they at least get a sliver of a break between witnessing total meltdowns? Fine. 2 home games later, Atlanta's down by 2 points and about to run a first and goal play with a little over a minute left in a game against a Lions team out of timeouts. The Falcons can take the clock down to 1 second, kick a chip shot game-winning field goal, and leave no time for Detroit by simply running and/or kneeling twice. What won't take the clock down to 1 second is running the ball just once. In the huddle, Matt Ryan looks running back Todd Gurley right in the eye.
Hey, don't score. Yeah, I wouldn't score.
And makes abundantly clear that a touchdown, by giving the Lions a chance to answer, would be detrimental. Gurley proceeds to take a handoff and, unlike Frank Costanza, fails to stop short, much to the glee of the Lions defense. In developments that shock precisely no one, Matthew Stafford quickly cobbles together a drive that ends with a game-winning touchdown pass on the final play. Now I'm sorry, but that is some brilliant work by our bird.
It is. It's absolutely brilliant. They blew a lead because they forgot the rules of football, then they blew another lead to break an all-time record, then they blew another lead because they scored a touchdown by accident in the 1 in a million scenario in which scoring a touchdown would be bad. There are probably a lot of teams that go a decade without a single loss this funny. The Falcons did it 3 times in the space of a month. As soon as you think you have a handle on these Falcons, they continue to escape your grasp. 2 men in particular demonstrate this very well. In 2010, Matt Bryant completed his first full season as the Falcons' field goal kicker, beginning a full decade of remarkable consistency. He played until his age 44 season, becoming one of the only such players to appear in an NFL game in modern times. Days after we release this episode, Tom Brady will join this club, thereby rendering this chart completely out of date and ruining everything what the hell else is new anyway. Between Bryant, Steve DeBerg, and Morton Anderson, the Falcons have been doing their best to corner the market on old guys. After Bryant retired, the reins were handed to Younghoe Koo, who had moved to the States from South Korea at age 12 and immediately fell in love with football. He excelled as a kicker at Georgia Southern, earned the starting job at the Chargers, and suffered one of the most brutal opening seasons you can imagine. In the final seconds of his first ever NFL game, his potential game-tying kick was blocked. 1 week later, he missed another game-deciding last-second kick. He was cut not long after, which, given the hyper-competitiveness of the kicking profession, often signals the end of a career. But Koo fought his way back, first with the AAF's Atlanta Legends, then later with the Falcons, setting the table for a 2020 season that's one of the best a kicker has ever had. Koo nailed 37 of his 39 attempts for a percentage of 94.9, which only 3 other kickers have ever surpassed at that volume. At just 27 years of age, Younghoe might be kicking in Atlanta for a long time. The NFL is arguably kind of short on cult heroes relative to other sports, but he really is one. In part owing to his comeback story, and in part because he's only the second South Korean-born player, after Hines Ward, to achieve NFL stardom. What's so confusing about this, as it relates to the Falcons, is that a missed field goal is the most conventional way to lose a game in tragic fashion, and no one is more proficient at blowing football games than the Falcons. And yet, in this chaotic decade of Falcons football, almost no team has had a more reliable kicking game. Over the last 11 years, thanks to Matt Bryant and Younghoe Koo, they're second in the NFL. In fact, across their history, the Falcons have been the beneficiary of historic kicking catastrophes. The shanks by Mike Michel in the '78 playoffs, and of course that shocking Gary Anderson miss that helped send him to Super Bowl 33. The Atlanta Falcons lose games they aren't supposed to, and they don't even lose those games in ways you'd expect. Missed field goals are too pedestrian for them. They're creating art here.
Having fully mastered the craft of losing in the most hysterical ways, the Falcons fired Dan Quinn after their 5th straight loss to open the 2020 season. A few months later, the team whose ownership has been comprised by an Arthur and the Smith family, who over the years held an affinity for seeking out old names they recognized and later the computer-generated Mike Smith, this time went out and hired Arthur Smith. In his first offseason in Atlanta, a known troublemaking nuisance to the Falcons from long ago had decided to emerge and make some more trouble for the Falcons. Professional shit-talker Shannon Sharpe, the man who spent the week of Super Bowl 33 engaging Ray Buchanan in a war of words, was silenced on the field, never getting another pass thrown his way following his first quarter gaffe that led to an interception. But decades later, in May 2021, he's back. Live on air during an episode of his TV show, Undisputed, Sharpe placed a phone call to his pal Julio Jones, for whom there had recently been percolating rumblings of a potential trade by the cap-strapped organization.
What's happening?
Yeah! All right!
Julio answered what he thought was a private call.
Can you remind him we're on television right now?
And, unbeknownst to him, crystallized the situation for the entire world.
You want to go to the Cowboys, Julio? Or you want to stay in Atlanta? Oh, man, nah, I'm out of there, man.
Well, now that's gonna do Atlanta's leverage no favors. Strong goof by Sharpe. Played the long game. Thanks, Shannon. A couple weeks later, the curtain officially closed on the scintillating Falcons career of the legendary Julio Jones. Though he was shipped out to Smith's old team, he didn't leave behind a bare cupboard. A couple prime weapons are poised to help fill Jones's massive shoes. They just made once-in-a-generation prospect Kyle Pitts the highest drafted tight end in NFL history at number 4 overall. And even following Julio's exit, the roster was not depleted of star Bama wideouts. Calvin Ridley had one of the most precocious starts to a career in NFL history, becoming just the 10th player since the merger to reach 3,000 receiving yards and 25 touchdowns across his first 3 seasons. In 2020, when he returned from a midseason foot injury, he had significantly more yardage than any other wide receiver in the league the rest of the way. Those two are foundational pieces of a new-look offense that entered 2021 with just 2 players remaining from their Super Bowl 51 squad, Jake Matthews and their longtime protagonist, Matt Ryan. Ryan, through the first 13 seasons of his career, had led Atlanta to the playoffs 6 times. Despite not having won a Super Bowl himself, he has still served as a quasi-gatekeeper for the big game. None of the 6 teams that beat him failed to play in the Super Bowl. Sure, that was inherent to the 2012 Niners and 2016 Patriots, but the 2010 Packers and 2017 Eagles, who beat the Falcons in the divisional round, each went on to win their NFC championship games. And the shocking Cinderella Super Bowl runs of those 2008 Cardinals and 2011 Giants, constituting 2 of the 3 all-time 9-7 conference champs, were both sparked by their wildcard wins over Atlanta, which springboarded their incredibly unlikely ensuing success. If you beat Matt Ryan in the playoffs, congrats, you've proven your Super Bowl bona fides. There's a certain hidden element of majesty tucked away in that.
Change happens quickly. Of all the players who suited up for the Falcons in Super Bowl 51, only 5 remain. Aside from Ryan and Matthews, Pro Bowler Deion Jones and long snapper Josh Harris are still here. So is Grady Jarrett, who's trying for his 3rd straight Pro Bowl after receiving honors in both 2019 and 2020. Who knows? Maybe he'll carve out a Falcons career as great as his dad's was. By the way, I don't want to step off my soapbox before saying this. Jesse Tuggle should be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. It's always a fool's errand to even try to predict what the Atlanta Falcons will do next. Matt Ryan is 36, and while he no longer approaches the otherworldly numbers he put up in 2016, he remains a terrific quarterback who led the league in completions last season. You know what? The Falcons have a new coach, and aside from the Petrino disaster, their fortunes have improved nearly every time they've hired a new coach. I'm going to go out on a pretty rickety limb here and predict that the Falcons return to the playoffs in 2021. From there, who knows? We've seen teams before who... Okay, alright, shh. God, I was getting to you, chill out. Holy shit. Well, there's no easy way to say it, Falcons fans. The Saints have left you behind. Since that Super Bowl season, as you staggered to a 28-36 record, the Saints have won 49 regular season games, the most in the NFL. You know, you spend all those years fighting with your sibling, you think you hate him, sometimes you really do hate him, and then one morning you walk down the hall past their old bedroom. It's empty. They moved out. Maybe you didn't hate him so much after all, huh? Look at where it started. It seems almost cruel that they started packing up right after the worst night of your life. They've joined the NFL's elite. They have every reason to move on from you, but you know what the good news is? They think about you all the time. I've got a choice selection for you. Week 14, 2017. Crucially, this is the very first time the Saints and Falcons have seen each other since the latter's Super Bowl collapse. Early in the fourth quarter, with the Saints up by 7, Devontae Freeman is forced out of bounds for no gain. Saints coach Sean Payton greets him with a choking gesture. He'll later say that he doesn't remember doing this. You don't? You don't remember clearly making a choking gesture and yelling choke at least 3 times loud enough for everyone to hear you on mute? After the game, Freeman pretty thoroughly and righteously punked him out, saying he, quote, don't know nothing about choking. He ain't from where I'm from. Also funny, just a few weeks ago, Freeman signed with the Saints, who are still coached by Payton. That'll be fun. But funniest of all, That night, it was Peyton himself who choked the game away. By this, I don't mean that the team choked or that he made a bad call. He, Sean Payton, personally blew it. Late in the game, the Falcons actually came back to lead by 3, and the Saints were clinging to hope, calling timeouts in the hope of forcing a punt and getting the ball back. In apparent frustration, Peyton does the one thing he cannot do, the thing a coach will get flagged for every single time. He walks on the field and starts yelling. That's an automatic flag that gives the Falcons a first down. Game over. That's the thing to remember about this bird. He might be a clown, but if you aren't careful, if you disrespect him, he'll clown you just as easy. With future Hall of Famer Drew Brees retiring after the 2020 season, it's tough to know whether the Saints will be able to keep widening their lead or if they're due for a backslide. What we know for certain is that between these two, it will always be like this. Regardless, this isn't really how you want to measure a rivalry, is it? It's all about the head-to-head record, and in that department, the Saints' lead is only... Oh, it's the Falcons who are winning! They're 53-51 all time against the Saints, including, of course, that time they beat them in the playoffs. All that winning and you still can't come home and take care of business down south, huh? I mean, it's none of my business. You want to lose to this big, goofy bird, it's up to you. All I'll say is this. You've got 2 games coming up against the Falcons this season. For the first time since the 60s, you'll have a chance to even up the score. And we are all going to be watching. There's a reason they put you 2 on primetime almost every year. You're crazy. Both of you, you're crazy. After February 5th, 2017, the Falcons got to go right back to not mattering. Not in the grand scheme of things. It's where they're happiest, I think. But Super Bowl 51 will define them forever. This night is them. And it always will be. If another team ever finds a way to suffer a humiliation this profound on a stage this big, it'll be ages from now. The Falcons will win a Super Bowl one day, probably when we least expect it. But even when they do, 51 will eclipse it. Kids born 50 years from now will read about it and laugh about it. They're purely, innately, timelessly, aggressively funny, in a way few things are, and no team ever is. That's their unique power. Their fire that will never stop burning. I really am fond of this doofus. If the Atlanta Falcons are your team, well, God bless you and God help you. I'm glad they're not mine. I will never trust them, but I love them to pieces. Some might survey all this self-inflicted drama, all these vertigo-inducing climbs and falls that would get any theme park shut down, and wonder, what the hell is wrong with them? Nothing. Absolutely nothing.